What's going on, you guys? I am coming to you today with an Armada ship breakdown for the Interdictor. Now, I have not done a proper Interdictor ship breakdown when I've been doing all of my ship breakdowns for the game, so I wanted to come to you today and do one specifically for this ship. I've kind of passed the Interdictor as I've been doing the ship breakdowns, but one of the things that has really changed the Interdictor is Wave 7. It's just a lot better than it used to be, and I want to talk about it in that regard and do more of a formal breakdown. So normally when I do ship breakdowns, I'm going to take a look at the ship card itself and different titles for it that are available, as well as different ways that you might outfit it, different roles that it can perform, and which commanders I think complement this ship the best. With that being said, let's jump right in and start talking about the Interdictor. First, I'm going to take a look at the Suppression Refit. So the Interdictor Suppression Refit is probably one of the tankiest. It's one of the tankiest types of ships in the game. Normally, I'm going to talk about the things that make both interdictors the same, because we also have the combat refit. But both interdictors have 9 hull, 2 command, 2 squadron, and 5 engineering. 5 engineering is absolutely insane. It gives you a lot of repair and support potential. And what makes that so good is that a token with 5, you remember engineering tokens give you half of your engineering value rounded up. So in the case of an interdictor, a token is going to bring you up to 8 points if you've done the engineering command and a token. But just to have a token give you 3 points is very significant. It gives you a lot of capabilities with the interdictor. For defensive tokens, we do have 4. We have only 1 brace, only 1 redirect, but we do have 2 contains, so we're much less likely to be critically hit, which is helpful considering that we have a lot of hull, so a lot of places to put damage cards, and we don't want those damage cards face up. We do have 3 shields in the front and 2 shields everywhere else, with 4 attack dice in our front and left and right arcs and only 3 in the rear. This is going to differ depending on which ship you're talking about, and our movement leaves us moderately flexible but not terribly movable, with only 1 click at every place. Went speed 1, 1 click, and speed 2, 1 and 1. Now for upgrades, they're going to differ a little bit. So what makes this one especially unique is the experimental retrofit, which is the new type of upgrade that comes with the interdictor. And in the interdictor suppression refit, we're getting 2 of them, whereas the combat refit only gets 1. We'll talk about those here a little bit more once we get through the ship cards. But we also have the ion cannon upgrade, and we also got the offensive retrofit, support officer, and officer. So we get a little bit of more variety with the experimental retrofit, with the suppression refit, but we only get one anti-squadron die, but we have a lot of blue dice around here. Now when we take a look at the combat refit, one of the things you're going to notice is we're going to also gain a black die, so the combat retrofit is better against squadrons. We are going to lose. You see, we go down from basically losing 1 of our experimental retrofits, but we're also going to upgrade 1 of each of our dice in the front and left and right to red. Now this is important because this gives us more long-range attacks and the possible capability for higher damage, but this also increases our cost from 90 to 93. And that is about it as far as the differences are concerned. I used to prefer this one because I've always been a fan of red dice, long-range combat, and using Vader as my commander. But some things from Wave 7 have really changed the interdictor, and I think I prefer the suppression refit right now. But it depends. There's different roles for them. So, well, first off, I want to talk about our experimental retrofits. So let's take a look. First off, we've got a G8. Let's take a look at the G8. Now the G8 experimental projector costs 8, and it says before any enemy ship at distance 1 through 5 resolves the determined course step, you may exhaust this card to temporarily reduce their speed by 1 to a minimum of 0 until the end of the maneuver. Now this is the only type of tractor beam, we're calling it a tractor beam, although it's technically not, but this is the only type of tractor beam that can pull somebody back down to 0. Although it doesn't keep them at 0. And the key here is that you can maybe make somebody not move and temporarily reduce them to 0, but when it comes time to shoot them, their speed will not be actually at 0, so they will actually be able to use defense tokens. So there is that. So next up, we've got the Gravwell projector. Now our G7X Gravwell projector, this one has changed, and so this one's important now. Before deploying fleets, place a Gravwell token anywhere in the play area. When a ship deploys at distance 1 through 3 of a Gravwell token, its speed dial must be set to 0. So at first, this one wasn't seen as that big of a deal, because if you fielded an Interdictor, you would put this somewhere in your opponent's deployment zone, and they would just deploy somewhere else. Or they would deploy smack in the middle of it and just do a nav the first turn and kind of ignore it. It was kind of easy to ignore because you're starting so far away from other people. This one was really only good in certain objectives that made you, like ambush or whatever, that would let you deploy stuff in the middle of the map, and then you could potentially have some ships starting out at speed 0 that way. But even so, it's not the it didn't used to be the greatest thing. Well, now it's been changed in a recent FAQ, and by the way, you can check out FAQs on Crabbok.com. I post links and to the latest errata and game changes there. But basically, this has been changed to where these tokens will actually stay in play for the entire game. And the reason that they're, well, I don't know if you want to call it a change or of a clarification, but the reason they stay in play the whole game is because there's cards deploying. There can be ships deploying all throughout the game. So this changes it quite a bit, because with the new inclusion of titles like Profundity and commanders like Rados, you're more likely to see ships now deploying in the middle of the field later on in the game. And this allows you to potentially put these Gravwell projectors in the middle of the battlefield to thwart your opponent. These can be a real hindrance to commanders like Rados, who have a big ship that's off the board, and now they can't jump it into the fight because they'll have to deploy it at speed 0, allowing you to shoot it, and they can't spend any defense tokens. So that's pretty significant. That's the G7X. So let's take a look. What else do we have? Let's do Grav Shift Reroute. Grav Shift Reroute is one of my favorites. Grav Shift Reroute. Before deploying fleets, place 1 Grav Shift token anywhere in the play area. After deploying fleets, you may move each obstacle at distance 1 through 3 of the token to within distance 2 of its current location. Obstacles can't overlap tokens, obstacles, or ships. So this lets you move all your asteroids and space stations that are within 1 to 3, which is a pretty decent sized circle. This one I love, 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 because this one gives you a distinct advantage when you are, when you're building an objective set that's based around, the station or obstacles. It lets you pull them all closer to you if you want, or, make a big wall that your opponent would have to fly through to come get to you. It gives you so many options, and it really makes for a very fun early game. So this is my favorite one out of all of them. And it's also only 2 points. But it's unique. You can only have 1, so if you're running multiple interdictors, you can't run 2 of them, which would really be crazy. But I absolutely love this one, especially if you're going to end up being second player and you have objectives to support it. And it happens to synergize really well with squadrons that have strategic as well, because it gives you total objective control, and I really like that. And our last one, Targeting Scrambler. This one is pretty nice. So this one is expensive though. It costs 5. And while a friendly ship at distance 1 through 3 is defending at close range, during the spend defense token step, you may exhaust this card to force the attacker to reroll up to 4 dice of your choice. So this can be used multiple times, especially if you use it with the Interdictor title, which I'll look at here in a second, because you have to exhaust it. You can use it every round, and potentially more than once a round. And it's just going to force somebody to reroll basically black dice. Not always black dice, though. If you're rolling red and black at close range against one of my friendly ships, I can, exhaust this card and force you to reroll that double hit red, that double hit black, up to 4. And that's huge. This is one of the things that can defend against a Star Destroyer Avenger with boarding parties, because I can cause you to re-roll stuff after you've already modified all your attack dice as much as you're going to do. It's just a real hindrance. I've recently been playing against interdictors, and I've had this used on me a couple of times, and it's really annoying when you roll about 12 or 13 damage on a Star Destroyer, and then they change this, and now you're stuck with only like 6. So very, very unfortunate when that happens. All right, so those are our experimental retrofits. I want to take a look at the title now, because it's going to basically factor into this. We only have one title, and it's called the Interdictor. So the Interdictor title itself only costs 3, and it says when a ship activates, you may exhaust this card to ready one of your upgrade cards equipped to this ship. So it's when any ship activates. It can be your ship, it can be a friendly ship, it can be an enemy ship. And basically this synergizes really well with targeting Scrambler because it will allow you to use the targeting Scrambler twice in a single turn, because you can potentially help out a nearby allied ship, and it can be yourself as well. And then the very next time a ship activates, don't forget to use Interdictor to reset targeting Scrambler. You can only do this one extra time per turn, but it's important to know that any ship activating, whether it's your own ship or a friendly ship or an enemy ship, lets you do this. The distinction here is you can't do it twice. So if somebody's got you in double arc with black dice, like maybe a Demolisher is right next to you and they're going to try and attack you twice, well, you're going to have, if you use this on the first attack, you won't be able to use it on the second attack because there's no ship activating in between. So that is the targeting Scrambler and Interdictor combination. So the Interdictor title, yeah, we only have the one, but it is, it's very useful for that. And there are some other things, and it definitely allows for future proofing as well. But it is not as helpful for cards that you're going to exhaust during your own turn and during your own turn only. So that's like one of our new blue upgrades. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and look at some different roles that this ship can fill and some different ways you might outfit it. So I'm going to start off with the combat refit, which is the harder one to use now because of the fact that I think the blue dice are a lot better. So one of the things I would do if I was running a combat refit is, you're only going to have one of your experimental retrofits, so maybe I would run him to support other close range ships. So I would run with targeting Scrambler, which is always nice. And there's almost no reason not to take heavy ion emplacements at this point, but I could consider. I'll save heavy ions for another potential build. Leading shots would actually be a decent option here for the combat refit, because I've got a couple of black dice. I'm sorry, blank dice that I could roll in theory with my reds, and I've got reds here and reds there. So I'm going to probably get a couple of shots because your arcs are pretty well defined. You don't have all one big, they're pretty well rounded. It's very easy to get double arc with this ship. And so I can potentially have 2 shots, and I'm going to have blues that I can spend to reroll my reds. So that's an option. Or if maybe I'm using somebody like Darth Vader, to help me reroll those potential blank red dice. But that being said, we also might want to put engine techs because we've only got speed of 2. Engine techs is definitely a nice option. Giving us a little bit more mobility, and allowing us to get into in either go after enemy squadrons, go after enemy ships, do a little bit of both, and we could do that. But this isn't really the best option to run this ship. I think there may be some things like this would work well in the Rebellion because you've got somebody like Sato who really enjoys having a ship with 2 red dice in multiple different places. But I think the key here, the real winner, is the Suppression refit, and most of the builds I'm going to talk about at this point are going to focus on the Suppression refit, and so let's look at a couple of Suppression refit builds. First off, I want to look at officers that are going to go well on this. There are several, and there's several different ways that you can use it. One of the things, if you're going to use this as a carrier, this isn't the ideal carrier, but it does work with some of the cards that it came with. You can run Flight Commander and Fighter Coordination Team. And these two, are very useful together because you're able to do your squadron command after you move, and then also after you move, you can move squadrons before you activate them. This is very popular with Yavaris builds for the Rebels, and the Interdictor is currently the only place I believe that you can get Flight Commander. So you're going to be able to do some fancy stuff, but the thing is you can only activate 2 squadrons this way. So this isn't ideal. It's not the best carrier out there, especially since the Empire has recently got the Quasar. It's definitely not the best carrier, but this is something that you could potentially do. But other options for officer, Mr. Tua is always a nice option for, especially if this is going to be your flagship, because of the fact that you've only got one brace and one redirect, and you don't want that single accuracy allowing you to die. So you could put Tua on there with ECM, and you can do that. It's difficult to pick an officer now because of the fact that Wave 7 brought out a lot of new officers and really added some contention. You've got Governor Price, for example, is a nice option if you are playing very strategic and want to make sure you're going last on a certain particular turn. But also there's some other really cool ones that are going to work well here. I am a big fan of somebody like Wolf Yularen if you are trying to be very tanky. So let's do a tanky build. Say Wolf Yularen, for example. It'll let you get your, you take an engineering first turn, and you can then continue to take engineering over and over and over again, no problem. Or just keep spending your token over and over and over again. And if you were doing something like that, maybe you would also use projection experts so that you could send some engineering to other ships and support them that way. And if you're supporting them, then toss on the targeting Scrambler too, for example. You could do some things like that. There's also new options if you don't want to run Wolf Yularen. You can also run somebody like Taskmaster Grint and just choose, engineering token, and you'll just keep taking engineering commands and also getting the token. And this is a really high amount because you'll have 8 engineering points a turn. You can send 2 away and then instantly replenish them, and then have even more points left over. So this is a very, very potent build right here for support. But let's look at a more offensive. There are some offensive. We looked at a carrier build. We looked at an offensive build, or rather a support build. There are some offensive builds. I am a big fan of disposable capacitors, which came out in Wave 6, but is just one of the most powerful cards for medium ships because it is restricted to small or medium only. Well, now all of a sudden our blue dice are much better now, because now we can roll them at long range, and at long range we might be able to have double arc on a ship, which would just be really, really nice. And then we'll put on one of my favorite new upgrades from Wave 7, the heavy ion emplacements. And so what this right here is going to allow us to do is take that first shot on the Star Destroyer, and we rolled a critical and 3 more damage, or maybe a critical and an accuracy and 2 more damage. And we're going to target their brace, and our critical is going to also drain their left and right and front shields as well. Now for the second shot, and by the way, we're at long range, so we're not even that vulnerable to counterattack. and then we're going to go ahead and shoot the side, and then just have all that damage pour through. And now I don't even have to worry about redirect at that point, because I've already drained your side shields, so you don't even have as much to redirect to. So this is just a really, really nice offensive capability. I'm a big fan of running interdictors this way, and you can run multiple interdictors this way. 2 of these together is just phenomenal if you wanted to do something like that. There are more and more double interdictor builds out there, and if you wanted to make it even more offensive, you could toss on Intel Officer, which is always nasty. And you can do that to both of them. If you're going tanky also, you could put Captain Brunson on there, so you're stopping incoming damage. There's just a lot of different things that you can do. Hondo is always good to give you tokens. Hondo is good all around, though. He's good in almost every situation, except for the fact that you do kind of help your opponents a little bit. So a lot of really good officers. We didn't look at too many of the other options here. So we looked at engine techs. They're always good. Engineering team is potentially good as well, especially if you're doing something with tokens. And you don't necessarily want to use projection experts, because that's a little more expensive, and it's a little bit more flying. You're going to have to fly your ships kind of close together. So maybe you're running Tarkin or something like that, and you just want to go with tokens. You can do engineering team. Medical team is kind of a gamble, but it's only 1 point, so it's great if you don't want to push your points up too much higher. And And nav team is all right. If you're doing tokens, nav team can actually be helpful here because you don't have a double click, so the extra yaw is always going to be useful for you. But the main ones you're going to run here, I think, would be engine techs or projection experts. I wouldn't run fighter coordination team just because I would use a quasar if I was going to be using this as a carrier. So with that being said, we also have what are the two best, that I would run in this case. For our experimental retrofit, I like to run grav shift reroute. It's almost guaranteed. If I'm running interdictors, I'm going to be picking some really good objectives that are going to take advantage of these. And at this point, if I'm not doing something with speed, or if I'm not expecting to face Radis or not worried about Radis, I'll go with targeting Scrambler. And the thing is, Radis is generally going to warp in for a close range shot. So targeting Scrambler is really good against Radis as well. And if I'm running two interdictors, I can put I can put a gravel projector on either one, for example. Let's do that. Gravel projector on both of them. So now I can really defend against that deployment and then have this other guy set up for targeting Scrambler. I don't think I'm a big fan right now of slowing ships down. I'm not a huge fan of that because I'd rather just blow them up. So I'm not really as interested, with slowing them down by using the G8, but there are builds that take advantage of that. Usually they're black dice heavy builds. You want to slow somebody down so you don't have to catch up to them. Although the Empire doesn't really need that as much because they've got the Demolisher that can always move and then shoot afterwards. So this would almost be more useful, I think, for the Rebellion. But the Rebellion has an answer to get black dice on people a little bit easier too, and that's with Commander Sato. So it's a little bit of a give and take. So there are builds that take advantage of this, but a lot of it depends on your opponent, like making a mistake and pointing the wrong way, and you not really giving them the opportunity to turn around. And usually when you have the G8, you're kind of broadcasting your strategy a little bit, and people are going to deliberately keep their distance from you, or not put themselves at a speed that they can't handle, being potentially slowed down. Also, it's 8 points, which is really, really expensive, especially for something that's only marginally beneficial. Now, if new upgrades come out in the future that give more advantage to slowing ships down, this will be hugely more important. So we're going to talk about some of the roles, right? I've talked about basically some offensive roles, some support roles. I think one of the biggest strengths of the Interdictor is its tankiness, and a second of its biggest strength is in manipulating the battlefield. It's unique in that aspect. And so that's one of the things that I love about it, but I love that it's now got some teeth, now it's a threat to shoot at the enemies. And I really, really like that. It's not the best as far as defending itself from squadrons, so if you are fearing that you're going to go up against a very heavy squadron force, it's possible you may go with the combat refit instead, but I would generally prefer the suppression refit because for one, it's cheaper. For two, you're getting a second version of these really, really useful upgrades, and I think that's a really big deal. So now I want to talk about commanders. Which commander is going to benefit these guys? The worst to the best. I'm going to do them based in my opinion. So it's not to say that like the worst commander is a bad commander. I just don't think it benefits the Interdictor as much. So at the bottom of my list is Ozzel. I'm not a big fan of using Ozzel for these because the Ozzel seems to benefit ships that have a wider range of speed, so that way they can speed up and slow down a lot more. Ozzel does have some uses though if you are playing very strategic with certain objectives and you wanted to potentially slow down to speed 0, he can make you go back up to speed 2, but that's not that big of a deal, and that's nothing that you couldn't do anyway already with a nav command and a token. So he doesn't give you something that you couldn't already get. So I'm not a big fan of that. The only thing that really would make Ozzel useful is the fact that he's the cheapest commander. So if you were just looking to scrimp on points, you might choose Ozzel. Next up is Sloane. Sloane is not necessarily the best for this ship because of the fact that it's not a very good carrier. I mean, she's a great commander overall, and so I'm not saying that she is terrible or she's bad, but she doesn't synergize well with what the Interdictor is designed to do. She doesn't synergize well with what the Interdictor does really well, and that is manipulate the battlefield and play very defensively. She is going to work much better with an ISD or a Quasar or even Gazantes, because they all excel at the way they handle squadrons, specifically the Quasar, and specifically Gazantes too. For their point cost, they make amazing carriers. So I don't think you're going to be running an Interdictor as a carrier very much, although it is possible if you're running a carrier-based fleet, you might also queue up some commands with this. But if you're designing your fleet based on the Interdictor, Sloane usually is not a real good character to pick. Moving up next is Jerjerrod. Jerjerrod is just okay. The Interdictor doesn't have any dead spots for speed, so it doesn't have any any speeds where it doesn't get any clicks. So the most you're going to get out of Jerjerrod is just one more click, which is okay, but a nav command could give you that. So there's very few cases where he's extremely useful, and he doesn't really work super well with this ship. He's not useless, but just not giving you very much. Next up is Vader. Vader is kind of in the middle of the list, and it's kind of a double-edged threat here. Vader is definitely my favorite Imperial commander out of the whole game. Always has been, probably always will be. But in the case of blue dice, he's less useful because blue dice don't have any blanks. And so if you're running Vader, usually you want more black and red dice. Now, Vader is more useful for the combat refit because of the fact that you've got 2 red dice, and you might potentially even concentrate fire to get a 3 red dice reroll, and then because you can easily double arc, you might be able to potentially reroll 5 red dice a turn with the Interdictor combat refit. But since I think you're going to run the Suppression refit a little bit more right now, I don't really put Vader up that high on the list. Next up is Screed. I'm actually putting Screed above Vader. And the reason Screed is a little bit higher is because of the fact that heavy ion emplacements are so awesome for the Interdictor right now. You're more likely to want to guarantee that crit. And also Screed is 10 points cheaper, so he's got 2 advantages over Vader. He can guarantee a crit to trigger heavy ion emplacements. And of course, he's limited to once per activation, but that's fine because you also can only use heavy ion emplacements once per activation because you have to exhaust them. So Screed works really, really well for that guaranteed crit that you need to have. And he's 10 points cheaper. So I'll give Screed a little bit of an edge there. Next up is Tarkin. So it's hard to rank Tarkin as high as I would like to because I love the character, but he's so expensive. If he was cheaper, I would take him a lot more. But he's the most expensive we've got right now at 38 points. And he gives out tokens, and the bigger ships you run that can take more tokens, the fewer ships you can have. So basically, if you're running Interdictors, you may only have 3 ships in your list, and so you're only going to get 3 tokens out of Tarkin. Of course, there is variation, and you can totally make me a liar out of that. But typically, when I see Interdictor fleets, I don't see 4, 5, or 6 activation lists. That's at least what's typical. So. But what makes Tarkin a lot better with the Interdictor is that there's so many that 5 engineering value is really making Tarkin shine, because you can hand out engineering tokens nonstop, and you don't really have to run engineering as a command. That way you can just use the tokens. You can use them for with some of those crew or some of those support teams that are going to enhance those tokens for you. And now you've got a method for some really nice stuff. And also, if you needed a little bit of a reroll for your heavy ion emplacements, you could do them that way. But generally, I think in this case, you're going to be running engineering tokens with Tarkin, and that's a really good thing for these guys. Next up is Tag. Tag is nice and cheap at 25 points, and if you're running, Tua and ECM, or even if your opponent gets unlucky and doesn't roll accuracies, you're definitely likely, especially if it's your flagship, to have to spend your only brace or spend your only redirect. And so tag can help you bring those back. Tag is also going to be useful for your contain tokens, because we have and I failed to talk about it because it had been swept under the rug for a little while. But your crew of there's another crew that doesn't get used a whole lot that is also going to help make tag a little bit better, and that's your damage control officer. Damage control officer is another thing that makes interdictors nice, and it's that your contain now stops all crits, and this includes things like the heavy ion emplacements or all the new black criticals, like your wide area barrages, and so when you have a damage control officer on an interdictor, you're going to be running through, you're going to be spending tokens like non-stop now that wave 7 is out. And so tag now is more useful because if you have to double contain, he can bring you one back. So you're not going to run into as many scenes where a turn rolls around and it's tag can trigger now, but you don't have anything to get back. If you're running something like damage control officer, you're way more likely to use tag, and damage control officer is going to be really, really cool in this new wave because of all the cool new crits. So tag is my fourth best. Going up is Constantine. Constantine obviously will work with your medium ships. He came out with this expansion, and he's all about manipulating speed. But one of the things that's cool about Constantine is that he can increase speed. And I have seen cases where somebody is playing their interdictors really slow and keeping them back by a deployment zone for an objective, and some fast ships come up to try to sweep around behind the interdictors, and Constantine speeds them up and makes them fly off the map. And it's definitely possible to do things like that. But since Constantine is going to be working with larger ships, medium or large, you've already got a medium ship here, so it's good. You're going to need more than one, obviously. But interdictor fleets are also often used with other large ships to support them as well. So Constantine is a good choice for interdictor-based fleets, is provided you have at least one other medium or large ship, and generally all medium or large ships. Next up is Thrawn. Thrawn is universally good. I shouldn't really have to sell you on Thrawn all that much, but because of the fact that you can just stockpile engineer, or you can just have your ships run engineer the whole time, and then you can let Thrawn handle everything else, whether it's concentrate fire, which I always enjoy, especially if you're running that blue crit and you want to make sure you can have that extra die to roll in case you don't get it, or you're doing if you want to do that nav to get that extra yaw and set up the double arc next turn. Thrawn is just kind of that guaranteed I got it when I need it. And he also works as a counter to some of the new squadrons and new mechanics that'll give you raid tokens. You can still always just use Thrawn's ability there. So that much is nice. And then our number one is Mahdi. I think with as strong as the interdictors are, giving them 2 extra hull. Mahdi's cheap. He's one of the cheapest in the game. And he's not the cheapest, but he's one of the cheapest in the game, and that's important. But his benefit is universal, and it's always good, and especially on a ship that's so hard to kill and has such great engineering, giving him that extra health, giving her or him, however you want to classify your ship, but giving them 2 extra health and making them the same hull as an Imperial Star Destroyer, but with more engineering value and more tools available to stop those black dice attacks and to regenerate shields so much faster. Mahdi's just incredibly good for the interdictor. So he is the man, and that is the interdictor's full breakdown. If you liked this video, guys, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think down in the comments below. I will be running more giveaways all the time, so make sure you are subscribed and click the bell for alerts, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to also be coming to you with more ship breakdowns because I am a little bit behind on the individual ship breakdowns, so they will be coming up, and I will be jumping into wave 7 probably sooner rather than later. All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.